The first time I ever truly understood how clever a bear could be, I was just a kid, tucked away in the narrow bed of our old pop-up camper. We had chosen a campground in the mountains where bear warnings were posted on every tree, the kind that make you double-check your cooler latch and keep your food locked away tight. My folks did just that. Every loaf of bread, every pack of hot dogs, all stuffed safely into the car for the night. But what no one thought about was the 12-pack of root beer cartons shoved under the bed where I was sleeping. To us, they were out of sight, out of mind. To a bear, they might as well have been glowing with neon signs. I remember the first sound that woke me, a low metallic crunch, like someone stepping on an empty soda can. Then a slurping noise, oddly cheerful and wet, followed by the whole camper, shuddering as if someone had leaned hard into it. My mom whispered something sharp. My dad sat up, and then came another loud crack as another can gave way. That's when it dawned on us. A bear was directly under our bed, feasting on sugary root beer, enjoying it more than we ever had. The smell of the sweet syrup hung in the air, mingling with the sharp scent of pine and damp canvas. My heart hammered in my chest as I pictured claws, raking through the thin metal siding. The bear deciding maybe the rest of the camper was worth investigating. My dad scrambled up, banging pots and pans in desperation, his voice booming in the dark, trying to sound bigger than he was. The bear, unconcerned, kept slurping and crunching, like a kid tearing through Halloween candy. Finally, Dad did something that stuck with me forever. He bolted for the car, flicked on the headlights, and flooded the campsite with blinding beams. That seemed to do it. The bear froze, then melted back into the shadows, leaving a sticky mess of crushed cans and root beer foam in its wake. I lay there in silence, the adrenaline making my skin prickle, while the night sounds of crickets and wind slowly crept back into their rhythm. That night I learned 2 lessons. Bears have a sweet tooth, and they can sniff out sugar, even through steel. And perhaps most importantly, a Diet Pepsi is safe from them, because the bear hadn't touched a single can of that. By morning, the campsite looked like a crime scene staged by a soda fiend. Crushed cans littered the ground. Sticky patches of root beer stained the dirt, and the faint smell of sugar still lingered in the cool mountain air. My dad crouched down, shaking his head at the mess, muttering something about expensive bear tastes. Mom wasn't laughing. She was already hauling everything edible into the trunk of the car, her voice firm as she reminded us, again, that this was exactly why the rangers gave those warnings. For me, though, the night before had left me wide awake, with a strange mix of fear and awe. I kept thinking back to the moment the bear had shoved under the bed, how close it had been, separated from me by nothing more than thin plywood and a mattress. I wondered what it had looked like. Did its eyes glow in the dark, like I'd read in books? Did it know we were inside, or was it only after that sweet, fizzy syrup? The questions hung in my mind, heavier than the cold morning air. We spent part of that morning cleaning, trying to restore order. My dad rinsed what cans were left in the creek, while I wandered a bit, searching for tracks. The prints were clear as day, deep and wide in the soft dirt beside the camper. I knelt down, fitting my hand inside one of them, and felt a shiver run up my back when I realized how small I seemed compared to that animal. It wasn't just a bear. It was a reminder that out there in the woods, we weren't the ones in charge. Later, when the sun was high enough to warm the campsite, we sat together and made a sort of breakfast out of what hadn't been ruined. Some cereal, a little fruit. Dad tried to lighten the mood, by joking that at least the bear had good taste, picking root beer over the diet stuff. My mom gave him a look that said she wasn't amused, but I caught the faintest smile tugging at her lips. As for me, I kept glancing toward the tree line, wondering if the bear was still out there, watching us, curious about the strange little family it had startled the night before. The thought didn't frighten me as much as it fascinated me. I felt like I'd gotten a glimpse into something bigger, a wildness that didn't care about our schedules, our coolers, or our convenience. Out here, we were just guests, and sometimes unexpected ones. That night, every little sound in the woods seemed sharper, closer, like the whole forest had decided to keep me on edge. A branch cracked somewhere up the slope, and my heart leapt before Dad calmly said it was just the wind. When a raccoon chittered down by the creek, I swore it was the bear, coming back for round 2. We went to bed early, but I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the camper made me picture claws prying at the corners, a big dark snout sniffing its way in. Dad, on the other hand, was determined to prove we'd learned our lesson. Before turning in, he paced around the camp with a flashlight, checking every corner for forgotten crumbs or scraps. He even pulled the floor mats from the car to make sure nothing sticky was hidden underneath. Mom double-knotted the food bags, tucking them tight into the trunk, and reminded me not to sneak snacks under my blanket. The whole ritual felt like preparing for a siege, and in a way it was. But as the night wore on, nothing happened. The crickets hummed, the owls called from the trees, and the air turned colder, heavy with the smell of pine and damp earth. Eventually my exhaustion won out, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. Sometime deep in the night, though, I woke to a faint sound. Soft footsteps outside, deliberate and steady. I froze, holding my breath. The camper walls seemed paper thin again, every rustle amplified. Then came a sniff, low and close, the sound of a nose dragging along fabric. I wanted to call for Dad, but my throat was tight. My mind raced with visions of the bear pressing in, curious about the people inside. For what felt like forever, it lingered, snuffling along the outside wall, near where my head rested. I pressed my face into the pillow, hoping if I didn't move, it would leave. And eventually it did. A faint shuffle, then silence, then the normal chorus of the forest returning. By morning, Dad found the prints again. Fresh ones, circling the camper, like a puzzle we hadn't solved. The bear hadn't tried to break in, just inspected us, decided we weren't worth the trouble, and moved on. Still, it left its mark on me. I remember staring at those prints with a mix of relief and unease. We'd been tested and maybe spared, but I couldn't shake the thought that the bear wasn't finished with us yet. When the time finally came to pack up and leave, the campsite looked nothing like it had when we first rolled in. The grass was flattened where the camper had sat, the fire ring full of ashes and charred sticks, and a faint sticky patch still clung to the dirt where the root beer had spilled. Dad walked one last circle around the spot, making sure we hadn't left anything behind, while Mom double-checked the car, determined not to repeat any mistakes. I helped fold the camper down, though my eyes kept wandering toward the woods, half expecting to see that bear watching us from the trees. The drive home was quiet at first, the hum of the tires and the wind through the cracked windows filling the silence. Then Dad chuckled to himself and said, "Well, we gave that bear a good story to tell his friends." Mom rolled her eyes but smiled despite herself. I sat in the back seat, thinking about how much the trip had changed the way I saw camping. Before, it had just been roasting marshmallows, fishing in the creek, sleeping under the stars. Now I knew there was another layer, one where we weren't just visitors, but part of the story the forest was already telling, whether we wanted to be or not. At home, when I unpacked my bag, the smell of pine needles and wood smoke still clung to my clothes. I thought about the bear's heavy footsteps outside the camper, about the raccoon clanging, through Dad's alarm, about the way fear had sat heavy in my chest, until laughter finally let it go. And I realized something. The trip hadn't been ruined by the bear. If anything, it had made it unforgettable. Even now, years later, I can close my eyes and feel that night air, sharp and cool, hear the pots clatter in the dark, and see those wide paw prints pressed into the dirt. It's funny how the scariest moments out there often become the ones we carry with us the longest. They remind us how small we are in the grand scheme of the wild, and how important it is to respect it. That trip taught me two things I've never forgotten. Always store your food properly, and never underestimate what a bear can sniff out. But maybe the bigger lesson was this: fear fades, laughter lasts, and sometimes the best stories come from the nights when everything goes a little sideways.